Joining me now is Michael Blake, one of the hosts of the Win with Black Men conference. The first thing I want to ask you is, what did you hear on that call that stuck with you, that stood out to you?
Incredible pride, incredible energy, that brothers did not want to wait to be engaged, that we weren't going to allow someone to paint a narrative about the vice president that wasn't true, and which we're already starting here. They're trying to say that she was negative when it came to criminal justice. It's not true. That she has instilled with brothers. It's not true. And that brothers wanted to be able to mobilize immediately. And so our final number, Sarah, was 53,862 who joined that call over that span in 4 hours. $1.4 million raised for the campaign, as well as for Black men organizations such as Win with Black Men, Collective, KAIROS Democracy Project. Brothers are not going to wait right now because we understand what's at stake for us.
And we should be clear, when he says brothers, he means black men. In case.
No question about that, full stop, right? We understand the assignment out here.
Just in case anyone is confused about it's not her actual brother. Anyway, all right, I want to get to, a new poll came out sort of comparing black voters and seeing who they would vote for, whether it be Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, now that she is going to ascend, it looks like, to the top of the ticket. And the numbers that came out were basically 77%, or there it is, 76% would go with Kamala Harris, 21% with Donald Trump. Those are historic highs for a Republican, never mind Donald Trump, who I think got, a heck of a lot less than that. What does she need to do in your mind to try and get potentially some of those voters back? And we know that black men are the numbers that are growing for Donald Trump.
Absolutely. So when we think about it, typically Republicans get about 12% of the black men vote and black vote collectively. So we got to shift that 9%. And I think it's pretty good to assume and presume that with a black woman at the top of the ticket, the same way we have with Barack Obama in 2008, those numbers will shift dramatically. I was in Iowa in 2008 when people wondered, well, can white folk and others vote for him? Well, yes, but we knew we were going to win because black folk are going to show up. I think it's pretty safe to presume that Kamala Harris and the track record that she has, and me being an alpha, her being an AK, I think we're going to have a divine nine mobilization that's going to happen in that regard. But there's an excitement. We can't ignore that. The reality is, when you had close to 100,000 black folk in a 48-hour span mobilizing on their own, then why do we think people will not show up? The data that always stays with me when I look at From Brilliant Corners and Cornell Belcher, it's not a question on will we show up. It's just making sure that we don't go vote third party. And Donald Trump's rhetoric is not going to work for us. When it becomes a conversation around justice, around jobs, around housing, all of those are spaces the vice president is going to mobilize black folk in a much better way than Donald Trump ever could. Yeah,
you talk about that, sort of those folks that might go out and vote third party, and there were between 76 and 21. There's still some space there for people to vote third party. And I just want to again clarify, the Divine Nine, these are historically black sororities and
our black fraternity, five fraternities, 4 sororities, and we're excited about the mobilization that's happening, and recognizing that there is an effort happening that people did not realize. And so when we say, not like us and playing off Kendrick Lamar, that's what we're trying to communicate, that there are people that are ready to get mobilized that are going to make sure that she becomes the next president.
I was saying that there is a lot of, the donations that have come in, there have been thousands of them that are exactly $19.08. 1908 is when Alpha Kappa Alpha, the sorority that she is in, a historically black sorority, was formed. And so you're seeing this kind of thing, and I think the Alphas were 1906, so we'll be looking at just how many people kind of globalize this for her there around the world. I do want to ask you about her history as a prosecutor, because this has become a point of contention. This country has a long history of imprisoning black men, in particular, disproportionately. She was a prosecutor. She did put folks in jail. How do black men look at this and grapple with this issue?
Yeah, well, she did her job as a district attorney and making sure that justice occurred. And when we think about what did she do, what they don't want to tell us the story is what did she work on in terms of addressing recidivism. What they don't want to talk about is how there was actually a pathway for those that wanted to get jobs afterwards. What they don't want to talk about is that she actually ensured that they weren't pursuing the death penalty when others try to do so. So when we talk about justice, I would rather have Vice President Harris, who has clearly had a record of justice that's on for the people, rather than the alternative of a man who had 34 times when people demonstrated that he was breaking the law. And so the comparison is that they're afraid. Digging deeper than that, we talk about a black job. A black job was a black prosecutor, a black AG, a black United States senator, a black vice president, and she will become a black president. He just hopes to have a job, and he's afraid that he's running against black women. And so the reality is that we see that they only have distractions. Similarly, the disastrous campaign that's happening for J.D. Vance, people need to understand they're saying these things because they have someone who is anti-DEI, they have a Project 2025, all of these things are trying to make sure to deflect. And so for all the black men that want to hear the truth, mobilize with us. Win with Black Men, our next call is Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, go to winwithblackmen.org. Follow our different efforts because we're focused on this. And the reality is we can't be divided. My mom, a two-time breast cancer survivor, God bless you for what you have gone through as well. It is important for us to say people are saying these things because they want to divide brothers from the sisters. That's what they're talking about. Maybe Donald Trump, if he had a record that actually was good rather than his own criminal record, he wouldn't have anything else to talk about.
Thank you so much for coming on and explaining all that to me. It will be interesting to see how this plays out in the future. Appreciate it.